2022 was a tough year for me, and I am definitely guilty of using language learning as a form of therapy, if you will. So there's actually a lot to talk about in this video, but this is my first video on this channel, so let me also introduce myself. I'm Tanya. Well, I'm actually Tanya. I'm Russian, so that's how my name is pronounced. I just mispronounced my own name. And I am a language learning enthusiast. As I've already mentioned, my native language is Russian, but I also have studied English, Spanish, Korean, Japanese, Italian, and Polish. And in this video, I wanted to tell you how it's been going for me, or at least how it went in 2022. So as far as goals go, I had several. First of all, I wanted to read more in Spanish and in Korean, and my goal was to read 12 books in Spanish and 12 in Korean, so a book a month. My main goal for 2022, however, was not to start any new languages. Did I achieve that goal? I'm just gonna tell you right away that I did not. First, let's get English out of the way, shall we? I'm not really trying to actively improve my English, and that's why I don't really track any time or activities. But at the same time, the majority of information I consume, be it in the form of audiobooks, normal books, podcasts, YouTube videos, most of that is in English. I also recently moved to the United States, and I can say that I haven't really had any problems language-wise. What I do have a problem with is the love that Americans have for small talk. And it's not like I have a problem with it in the sense that I don't like it or I think that it's bad. It's just that I am really not used to it as a Russian. I'm also extremely socially anxious. So when I go to, say, Starbucks and the barista will be like, hey, how are you doing? Like, what are your plans for tonight? I kind of have a hard time realizing that they don't actually care, that they're just being polite, and that I shouldn't really tell them how I'm actually doing, because as a Russian, again, my first instinct is to complain. I feel like whenever we are asked about how it's going, like we always have this urge to complain about something. So yeah, I've been kind of having a hard time adjusting to that, but everything else, more or less, I think is okay. Also this year, I read a lot of books. I read 63 books, and 47 of them were in English, which I honestly kind of view more negatively than positively, because I think at this point, it's really hard to sort of read 47 books in English and then read like 24, 25 more in other languages. I should really be cutting back on reading in English, but so far it's been kind of hard because the majority of books that I'm interested in are in English, or maybe I'm just not really making enough effort to find interesting information in Korean and Spanish. So yeah, this year I am making a promise to myself to make more effort to read or to find interesting materials to read in Korean, Italian, and Spanish. Speaking of Spanish, the state I live in has a lot of Spanish speakers. So there's a lot of opportunities to practice, but to be completely honest with you, I don't really use those opportunities that much because I rarely learn languages to actually talk to native speakers. I feel like the most joy that I get in learning languages is when I am able to read or to watch something in that language rather than talking to people. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities to practice. I'm not really using them at the moment. As far as reading goes, my goal for Spanish was to read 12 books, and I finished the year with 9 books, which I think is not that bad. I think that one thing that actually helped me read 9 books in Spanish last year was the fact that I finally was able to install and start using Libby. The local libraries that we have here, they do offer quite a lot of audiobooks in Spanish, which is what I started doing. It was actually my first time listening to audiobooks in Spanish, and I thought it would be harder because when it comes to Spanish, I usually read ebooks, and with ebooks, you can always just tap on a word that you don't know to see the translation. But in the case of audiobooks, it's really cumbersome. Plus, I usually listen to audiobooks when I'm doing something else, like walking my dog or washing the dishes. So looking things up wasn't really an option, and to be honest, I'm too lazy to do that. So I didn't really know if that was going to be a deal breaker or not. It wasn't really. I was still able to understand the story, and I actually am looking forward to reading or listening to many more books in Spanish this year. I first started learning the language in 2020, and I couldn't really make much progress because I would just get super bored. I do love the language, I love the culture, I love Italian music, but because I already speak Spanish, every time I would sit down to study with a textbook, I would have to pick up a textbook that was meant for beginners, but at the same time I'm not really a beginner, you know, because I already have this foundation. I speak Spanish, and so I would just get bored and I would stop. But then I would also listen to music in Italian or like watch something in Italian. I would be like, oh, I really want to go back. So this year I decided to stop trying to study Italian using textbooks for now and just try to watch something on Netflix with Italian subtitles, so no translation. And I tried watching one show. I don't really remember the name. I'm gonna put it here somewhere. I really liked it, and I really was able to understand a lot, like much more than I thought. At the same time, there were whole scenes where I was not understanding what was going on, and like the visual cues were not really helpful. But most of the time, given that it's a language that I haven't really like studied, I could pretty much get what was going on. So I was in this kind of an awkward place where I do understand a lot, but at the same time, I'm still a beginner when it comes to a lot of things, especially grammar. So I didn't really know what to do. So I just decided to try doing a little bit of Speakly, which is a language learning app, every day. And I think I did that for maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month. I was also trying to study with a textbook that is meant for Spanish speakers who want to learn Italian, which was actually a good idea because that book kind of focuses on the differences between Italian and Spanish instead of kind of trying to teach you Italian from scratch. I did a little bit of that, and then I found the app that probably has become like the app of the year for me, which is Closemaster. To be honest, I don't really even think that Closemaster is that unique because in the end, like its ultimate goal is to teach you vocabulary, and you could do that with any other app. You could do that with Quizlet, you could do that with Anki, but I did it with Closemaster. So what happened is I decided to stick to Closemaster for a month, I want to say. I used it daily, not really more than that, just a month, but I saw such a huge difference. Next time I tried to watch a show in Netflix, I could understand pretty much everything. And it was just such an interesting feeling because I think it's kind of natural to expect progress when you're learning vocabulary, but at the same time, usually it doesn't really happen that fast. Like I literally just watched a show in June, and then I watched another show in August, and I can already understand like pretty much everything. I was just so high on that feeling that I also decided to read a couple of books. I started with graphic novels. I guess you could call Heartstopper a graphic novel. I read volume 1 and volume 2, and then life kind of got in the way, so I am still hoping to read volumes 3 and 4 sometime soon. The moral of the story, I guess, is not that you should use Closemaster. Again, any app that helps you, or maybe not even an app, maybe like physical flashcards or something like that, but anything that helps you learn vocabulary fast. If you do it long enough, you will definitely see results. My next goal for Italian is to ideally be able to read an actual novel like sometime later this year. And also, I have to say this because I've been kind of boasting about how my Italian improved in such a short period of time. Everything that I said before only applies to passive skills such as reading and listening. I didn't really do anything to improve my speaking or writing. I think when it comes to understanding, I'm probably somewhere at B1, maybe even higher sometimes. But when it comes to actually producing the language, I am at a much lower level. Not even A2, I think. It's okay for me for now because I'm not really planning to go to Italy or find anyone to talk to in Italian. If I want to do that in the future, I will definitely start working on my language production skills, but for now I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna keep working towards my reading goals for Italian. I spent so much time last year learning Japanese, and I wish I could say I have something to boast, but no, not really. That number of hours that I spent learning Japanese didn't really translate into anything meaningful. I still cannot do pretty much anything in Japanese. I cannot read books, I cannot watch anything, and I spent 400 hours on that language. I also have to say that I spent a lot of time on Japanese in the beginning of the year where I was feeling the worst mentally, and it sort of became a form of therapy for me. I've read a bunch of great readers. I finished both Minna no Nihongo and Genki. I studied characters, like I practiced them so much because I really enjoyed it. I also studied 4 and 5. I listened to podcasts. I tried watching some Japanese shows, but because I was in such a dark place mentally when I was doing all of that stuff, now that I'm feeling better, I kind of associate Japanese with that time and that state that I was in. And I really don't want to go back to that state. So for now, that also means not going back to Japanese. And I was trying to kind of see what plans or what goals I want to achieve in terms of language learning next year. And I couldn't think of anything for Japanese. So I'm just pausing my Japanese studies for now. Korean. I have such a love-hate relationship with Korean. I think I've been studying it on and off for about 10 years at this point. I also used to live in Korea for 3 years. I was in the Korean government scholarship program. So I did a year of learning Korean in Korea, and then I did 2 years of my master's in Korea, but not in Korean. I kind of should be fluent in Korean by now, but I'm not. I think my main problem is that it's really hard for me to find content in Korean that I like, since I'm not really into dramas or K-pop. So at this point, I've kind of given up on basically everything but YouTube videos and books in Korean. I really do think that Korean content creators have some really unique perspectives on things that interest me. Same goes for books. There's a lot of really interesting books, both fiction and non-fiction books, that I would really be interested in reading. So yeah, I think my main goal was and still is to actually start reading books in Korean the way I do in Russian, English, or Spanish. Last year, I impulsively bought a bunch of books. I think I bought 4 YA novels, 1 self-help book, and also a webtoon. So I still have all those books, and my goal is to read at least 1. But at the same time, I also know that as soon as I read my first book in a language, I usually just start reading one after another, because it's just such a great feeling to be able to read a book. I feel like reading is probably like 70% of why I actually learn languages. Not 70, but 50, definitely. And yeah, so for me, being able to read 1 book usually means that I'll start reading my 2nd book, 3rd book, and so on right after I finish the first one, which I really hope happens this year with Korean. So my main goal last year was not to start any new languages, and I have already told you that I failed at that. I did dabble a little bit in Arabic and Hindi on Duolingo. Since then, I have learned that the Arabic course on Duolingo is terrible, so do not try that. I'm still a little bit confused when it comes to Arabic because I just really don't know which dialect to learn, or whether I should even like start with a dialect or start with MSA. So that's been something that kind of keeps me from starting Arabic seriously, which I think is a good thing. Hindi, I watched so much content on Netflix last year in Hindi, and I just fell in love with it. I really want to study it seriously one day, but for now, what's kind of scaring me off is the lack of resources. The course on Duolingo was pretty good though. I only did it for like a week or 2, but I really enjoyed it. But then again, I'm also not really good, so I can't really say whether the quality of it is good or not, but I really enjoyed it. And after Hindi and Arabic, I decided to settle on Greek. I do have some Greek blood in me, if you wish. I hadn't really ever learned a language because it was a heritage language for me. I usually do it for other reasons. And so I was really kind of curious about how that would go. Unfortunately, that motivation did not last that long. I love Greek, and I sound like a broken record, but I do hope to go back to it in the future. But I got distracted. I got distracted by Polish. That's all I can say, because in September of last year, I had to go to Poland to get my American visa, because that's where you are supposed to get it if you're Russian. I had already tried learning Polish before, back in like 2017 when I was living in Korea, but at that time Korean was my main priority, so I kind of just decided to postpone it. And when I went to Poland, I thought, I'm just gonna buy a couple of books and then I'll start them like maybe in 2023 or 2024. No, I started studying with those books immediately. I didn't even wait to leave Poland. That's when I also started my 100 days of Polish challenge on Twitter, which I didn't really finish, but I did study a lot of Polish, almost 100 hours. So Polish actually is a great language to learn, and I recommend it to anyone and everyone for many reasons. First of all, there are some really great resources, both online and offline, and I think I'll make a separate video about what I used to study Polish. Second of all, it's the second, I think, biggest Slavic language after Russian, so there's a lot of content in it. If it's something that's important for you, for me, it's really important because, as I said, I mainly study languages to consume content in them. And also, there's something about native speakers of Polish. I feel like they are extremely friendly and very, very willing to help you out as a foreigner who's learning their language. My overall goal for 2023 is to encourage more depth than breadth in my language learning, which means not to start any new languages and try to improve my level in those that I have already started. That's pretty much all I wanted to tell you today. Since this is my first video on this channel, I'm really curious to know more about the people that are watching this video. So if you don't mind, please tell a little bit about the languages that you study, or where you're from, or how 2022 was for you in terms of language learning, or maybe even the goals and plans that you have for 2023. Thank you for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!